really great session. And as thank you. We're going to record it for those who are unable to come. And also hopefully have it up so people can kind of refer back as well. First, let me apologize for not being on camera. I'm away, it's half term, and I'm in a caravan in Essex with my children in the background who I'm telling them to be quiet. And the internet is absolutely bloody shoddy. I thought it was going to be great. And I can't even, they're so clever. You've got to pay for internet and they banned it on your phone and all kinds of stuff. So I'm here, but I'm off camera. I'm obviously be part of the conversation and hope that you guys will engage as much as possible. It's a real pleasure to have both Nicola Brown and Stephen. We all know Stephen. Stephen's part of our leaders alumni. So it's wonderful for him to be here and be talking to us about the work that he does. And Nicola's from The Garden and Stephen is from Studio Lambert. So it is just first, I'm going to give the mic. I'm going to ask Nicola to introduce herself. Talk to us a little bit about her job, her day job at Garden. If you can just introduce yourself really quickly, Nicola, that'd be wonderful. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your day job at Garden and your involvement in the Squid Games, the Challenger.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Nicola. I'm creative director over here at the Garden. And my role here is to sort of oversee all of our output. So making sure that everything that we do is like absolutely brilliant. It's a very easy job, as you can imagine. And I look after both projects in production, but I also look after development. And so I pitch and get things to pre-production and then see them through. And look after our wonderful team of execs who actually do all of the real hard work with me. And I've had the absolute joy of working with Stephen and the team at Studio Lambert on Squid Games, which was genuinely one of the most enjoyable experiences of my TV career, I'm very pleased to say. So that's me.
I'm interested in hear more what made it so enjoyable. Steve, do you want to introduce yourself? Most of us know you, but do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see you. Some familiar faces in here. I'm Stephen Yemo. I'm exec producer at Studio Lambert. I work across some of our unscripted titles. And I was one of the exec producers on Squid Game, The Challenge, working with a team of execs and a huge team, as you can imagine. And it was great to work with Nicola again, because we actually hadn't worked together or seen each other for like 16 years.
Yeah.
Then we worked together and we're both like researchers or APs back in 2006. So it was nice to work with her again on this. So yeah, and I'm actually at Lambert now, just doing another reality show, and we'll hopefully be together doing the second series of Squid Game at some point.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I mean, off of the back of the immense success of Squid Games, the drama, how did this come about? Just tell us a little bit about how the Squid Game, the Challenger came about. Nicola, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Well, I think that everybody in the world, it certainly feels like, watch the drama. And I think off the back of that, every TV company was going to Netflix saying, hang on a minute, we could do an unscripted version. And I think we were both in a very lucky position that Netflix liked the ideas that we were proposing and thought it would be a good idea to team us up to deliver the series. And I think, it's quite interesting. The two companies have really brilliant complementary skill sets. Studio Lambert obviously makes millions of amazing reality shows. And we at the Garden sort of come from a more documentary background, but one that does a lot of rig at scale. So used to sort of following unfolding stories, and quite uncontrollable ones, in sort of large scale environments where you've got a lot of people passing through, like A&E or custody. So that's sort of how we ended up together. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo that, I know both companies came with lots of good ideas for the show, and Netflix sort of put them together, and then we sort of worked in harmony to deliver the show, basically.
Was that relationship quite easy? Like you said, the skills were quite complementary, so is that why that worked really well? Yeah.
I think so. I think when you're doing something at that scale, you have to work together. or you're never going to achieve it, right? That's sort of the bottom line. And actually everybody was so invested in, you know, making the series as good as it possibly could be, because obviously, you know, you come with a really high bar. Like, it was definitely something that you think, this is, how lucky are we to get the opportunity to make an unscripted version of this? And like, if we do it badly, that's going to be really bad for all of us. So actually, like, we all got behind the project, and actually we had a huge amount of support from Netflix themselves. You know, obviously their unscripted team looked after us brilliantly, and we had a really close working relationship actually between Netflix, Studio Lambert, and The Garden. It all, you know, just trying to make the series as good as it possibly could be. But it was really enjoyable. I think when you've got something which is at that scale, you know, 456 contestants, you know, really big studio, really complex games, you know, a sort of thought process of how do we track the editorial through it, what characters are we going to follow. There's so much to do that actually just getting on with it, and in quite a compressed timeline as well, you know, from us all getting the nod to actually going into the shoot it was quite quick. It was surprisingly quick. So we
Roughly
all
how
pulled
long?
together.
So sorry, roughly how long was that from the point that you went, like you said, you got the nod and then went into production?
Well, it was sort of springtime. We shot in January, so we went into quite a fast sort of pre-production and casting phase. We shot in January, and then I went on mat leave at the end of the shoots, and luckily Stephen was there to see the edit through, so I missed that entire process. I'm very sad to say, but yeah, it was, when did we deliver? It was sort of
or end of early September last year, and then it was on in November in Thanksgiving. Yeah,
Thanksgiving. So tell me about the casting, because like you said, Nicola, there was 400, nearly 500 people on that show. How did you kind of go about, you know, what was the thoughts around castings, and how did you go about casting and ensuring you had the right mix of people?
yeah. Do you want me to say this, Nick? So casting was like nothing that anybody had ever cast before. So what we did is we had 3 separate casting teams to try and find people. They were quite big teams, obviously, because there was a lot of applicants and we needed a lot of people. So we had one that was looking after sort of the East Coast of America, one that was looking after the West Coast of America. So they sort of split America into 2. And then we had one team in the UK, which was looking for people in the UK and the rest of the world. And so they would take applications and then make little videos through their casting producers and their casting execs, whittle that down, and then they would be funneled to us. There was like 4, 5 execs who would watch. We had 18 pitches, I think, which all contained sort of 60 tapes, 60 to 80 tapes. So every week we were watching 80 tapes basically, and basically saying yes or no based on a 2-minute video. Obviously, when you cast a show of 12, even 20 people, you'd watch a casting tape, then you'd meet them on Zoom, and then you'd probably meet them in person. But obviously with such scale and volume, we didn't have the opportunity to do that. So we had to make quite quick decisions on who we liked based on their short casting tape. And then sort of have a grid when everyone would say sort of yes, no, maybe. And if you've got a couple of yeses. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to say, what was the main criterion? I mean, obviously, a gut feeling of if you like the person, what was the main criterion which chose people?
Yeah, there was sort of for me, it was sort of twofold. Like, what are they good telly? Particularly, you know, I think everyone knows how he works in TV. Someone is an interesting television character, but also, are they not the type of person you'd usually see on telly? Because this is such a different show that we didn't just want punters, as we sort of call them. You know, we wanted sort of real people that had real aspirations for the money and for the opportunity, and that reflected the drama in that sense, right? They were just regular folk a lot of the time. So in the drama, so that's what we wanted to try and get across in this cast as well. We wanted to get a range of people, but people that you wouldn't normally expect to sort of see on reality shows. And I think once you get to the final edit, and especially sort of the winner in particular, that is quite evident.
Mm.
One of the slightly funny things was when we're doing it at like such a high volume that you sort of, people were siphoned into categories a bit, weren't they? So we might have like 20 really good stay-at-home mums, and you'd be going, so which stay-at-home mum do we, like, should we go for, this one or this one or this one? Like, there's just some like funny quirks of the volume that
but then we'd also go, but we probably need all 20 because we don't know how many of them are going to survive the first game. So whereas you make a sort of small, when you do a small cast, you go, oh, we'll have 2 of those or 1 of those. You actually need quite a lot of everybody. Because you just have no you can't predict who's going to last 2 seconds or who's going to make it right through to the final game.
I mean, it is funny. You've never been so invested in a cast, have you? You know, we were like, we had pictures up on the walls, and having watched all the tapes and seeing people get through, you think, oh God, that one's got such a great story, that one's got such a great story, that one's got such a great story. And then red light, green light happens, and you're like, oh well, you know, they're all gone. Right, who we got to play with?
Did you start with, did you start with the idea that, is there a kind of number we needed 456? Why 456? How did we get to that kind of number? Don't think the raising hands is a question, but you've got a question. Dina, all right, after we answer this question, I'll come to Dina. Sorry, so why 456 that's this, and apologize if that was the same as the Squid Games and the drama, and I didn't watch all of it, and that was quite apparent, if that was where the number came from. But was that the same, was that why that number had come from?
You're absolutely right. We were sort of we wanted to stay as true to the drama as possible, and Netflix did as well. And obviously that is then a huge undertaking when you've got 456 players, but it's 10,000 per player, so that's how you get to the 4.56 million prize fund.
Dina, you have a question. Do you want to jump in?
Hi. I wanted to know a bit more about, because I know the behind the scenes kind of covered a lot of the game aspect of it and working out that side of it. But how did you approach covering the reality side of it with such a large cast? Because I know in my experience, even when you have a smaller cast, the discussions over which story to follow and where stories are developing and what you can cover and would like to cover but can't are lengthy anyway. But with such a large cast, how did you approach that?
Well, that was tricky, really, because as you say, you can't cover everything. When there's so many people, you can't cover everything. We sort of made a decision quite early on that we were going to, through the casting process and what we knew of the cast, we were sort of going to pick what we call them people of interest. We call them people of interest. So we picked a group of like 50 initially that were our people of interest that we were starting to follow from the start of the show. So if you remember episode 1, where you sort of met a few people on the start line of red light, green light, we filmed a load of those types of things because we kind of knew that these people had something interesting about them. And then what we did is after that 50, we had another 50 afterwards that were sort of, they could replace those people if they got eliminated. So we sort of had an eye on, like, of the 4 or 5 picks, well, let's start with sort of trying to focus on these, it sounds ridiculous, trying to focus on these 50 and these 100, basically, and just sort of see where their stories go. And then we sort of knew that we had to try in some way cover everybody in order to try and tell stories. And fair play to the gallery team and the directors and stuff. They had a really amazing system of going, well, we just make sure we cover a story or a moment with everybody every day, basically. So once they got into the dorm, they were just ticking off, right, have we got that person, that person, that person, that person, and trying, and just in their little chats, in their little groups, making sure that those people are covered. And then on most reality shows, you have your 2 streams. You have your A stream and your B stream to cover stories. We incorporated a 3rd stream as well, so we had 3 streams running, so we had a huge gallery, so we had 3 streams running, so that to obviously help us with the scale. And then we did a thing which is one of the other execs' idea, and I think it was a really good one, is that we had a load of APs who were just listening into microphones. They weren't actually following, but they were just listening into microphones, and they had a list of people who weren't being covered on stream, but they were just listening into microphones, and they could just sort of see if, like, oh, this person sounds interesting, or this, so they could sort of see as stories were starting to develop with people, and they were just feeding that into producers to go, oh, do you know what, player 221, they're having an interesting conversation, maybe next time we should focus on them. So we had people, there's a lot of monitoring going on in order to see if we could catch story. And then one of the things, I'll shut up in a minute, but I think we all knew is that we shouldn't get bogged down in trying to cover the winner from episode 1, like a normal story, a normal episode, a normal drama would do, or a normal story would do. We just sort of felt, we knew that there were points within the show where we could really focus in on anybody. I personally always thought that the great thing about Marbles was that whatever happened, we knew that the way we were going to shoot Marbles, we knew we were going to get them to talk to each other and bring out their story, that if we started really featuring them, the eventual winner, we'd always do it at least halfway through the episode, through the series, because of that Marbles interaction. So yeah, we just didn't get bogged down and like, oh my God, that person's the winner, we need to get them from episode 1. We just thought we'll just let the best stories play out, and then the eventual winner story will come through.
And I think that there's enough in the overall like architecture of the format, really. So the in-dorm twists meant that, you know, people would like put themselves forward for things. They might volunteer for something, and you sort of think the person who's going to volunteer is someone who, you know, fingers crossed, is an interesting character because they're in quite a risky situation. They've probably got something about them that means they're going to step up. And we sort of designed some of those in-dorm sort of twists to give us sort of enough fallout that would sort of drive the actuality in the dorm and drive the reality. So you'd always have that, you know, you had that space with a little lever to pull in it, and then you'd be running up to the games anyway. So that it felt like there was always going to be something interesting happening. It was just managing to follow like whichever characters would sort of pop up and come to the fore during those. So yeah, and luckily it seemed to work all right, didn't it?
Yeah, really well.
Rupert, you've got a question as well, yeah? Rupert?
Yes, sorry. It was just my question was just it was kind of clear that people didn't spend that much time together in terms of actually really living, it seemed to me anyway. So I just and as a kind of consequence, the interpersonal relationships seemed a bit thin. And I just want to understand to what extent that was conscious. And also, I'd love you to take me through the you know, just walk me through the process of the decision that you guys came to in terms of the deaths and the paintballing and people going, ugh! as a way of saying that they've been killed. I'm just really fascinated in terms of how you came to those choices.
Shall I take the sort of the first one, the interpersonal relationships? I think it's interesting that you say that. I think the cast went in, and the shoot was 16 days. So they lived in the dorm and they interacted with each other for 16 days, and they were locked in there, and the only way out for them really was to be eliminated. So in terms of those relationships and how they play out, I think what you might be feeling is the fact that it's a huge group of people initially, and perhaps some of those relationships that might have felt a bit deeper to you were perhaps with characters that we didn't see on camera. That could have happened. But also, if you think about it, they're going in and they are facing each other as competition ultimately, because only one person is going to walk away at the end. And they've come with the knowledge of the drama, which is, well, hang on a minute, at some point someone is very likely to double cross me, or I am going to have to double cross someone else. And so I think maybe part of what you felt could be in relation to, you know, an element of people being a bit on their guard and sizing each other up. But I do think there were, you know, genuine, heartfelt relationships and bonds that developed, you know, throughout, because I think that process is one which was incredibly stressful for them at times, especially when they got into the latter stages of competition and they felt much closer to the money. I think you could watch that the pre-game for marbles. So when they're sat all having their picnics together and they're so happy and they're sat with someone that they really care about and they've bonded with, or maybe it's the mother and son together, and there's that horrible dawning moment for them where they realize there's a pack of marbles in the bottom of their picnic basket. Sorry if anybody hasn't seen that, spoiler alert. But the moment when it dawns on them, that I think for me, that's real emotion. Not only that they realize they've got a 50% chance of being kicked out from this point, but also that it's, you know, me versus the person that I'm sat with, who's someone that I've, you know, either had a relationship with previously in terms of the mother and son, or someone that I've formed a strong relationship whilst I was in there with. So yeah, I think yeah, maybe I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be my take on that.
Yeah, sorry, it does answer the question, and I'm kind of pushing things, obviously, just to tease stuff out of you. So please forgive me. I'm not meaning to be curt in any way. So the other question is just to what extent the problems of the 16-day shoot in terms of really just bedding down, and I just say that as doing reality shows that have a longer period of gestation. So I just want to kind of find out, because I know that with something the scale that the show is at, that the 16 days, I mean, even that probably is a push, seeing the amount of money spent on the sets. But I just want to understand, from just in terms of your own sense of it, especially as you're going to season 2, do you think that's enough? And also, will the stuff that's happened in their downtime, will that be featured more? Because there were things like the kind of slightly contrived things of the kitchen duties as a kind of slight MacGuffin to get the business of storylines told. And I'm just intrigued as to, you know, the great thing about the show is the opportunity to evolve the show, which is clearly why both of you would love to kind of work on it again. And I'm just, without kind of giving too much away, just trying to get a sense of the kind of, you know, the inner ticking of both of your thoughts and thought processes. Thank you.
I see the interesting one that I think, you know, there's a reality that we all grapple with, which is, you know, you're given a sort of budget and schedule and you're working to it. So sometimes, you know, you might want a long time to do something and it just might not be possible. I would say that for them and for their sort of lived experience, I think the time probably felt about right. I don't know what you think, Stephen, just in terms of then having downtime in the dorm, in and around the challenges, but also, you know, in terms of the sort of psychological pressure on them. That dorm, you know, is like sort of being in a casino. You don't really see that much daylight. You're just sort of trapped in one space. So actually, I think eking it out and leaving them in there for longer, I don't know whether they would just have gotten really potentially quite sort of bored and twitchy. I think for them, the balance of activity and sort of downtime sort of felt all right, and it felt all right from an editorial point of view as well. I don't feel that it was, you know, particularly that we felt like particularly challenged by the lack of time. I don't know what you think, Stephen. You went through the edit, so you might have a different viewpoint.
No, I would agree. I think it's an interesting observation you make, Rupert, and I think for me, I always like to. It was a stressful environment for people to be in, because, like, what's your chances of becoming a multimillionaire in life? Obviously quite slim, you know. But what are your chances when to have a chance of becoming a 1 in 456 chance of being a multimillionaire is actually quite a big chance, you know. And then so that pressure is on you all the time, and then once you get into the dorm, you're like 1 in 200. So I think, and they were always thinking about that money. So I think that some people didn't want to give too much away. There was some relationships which were quite true friendships, like Chad and Mai, that became a quite good friendship. Like Felicia and Ashley, they became quite good friends, and we focused on that. But and like Rick and Stephen, they were quite good friends. So we did have some of those real friendships within the series. But I think people weren't pouring their hearts out and telling everyone their total backstories, because I think they were, like Nicola said, quite guarded, because you don't, eventually that your blood could be on that person's hands, and their blood could be in your hands, sorry. So I think it was a game ultimately. So when you play a game, I don't think there's as much opportunity for like natural friendships than natural bonds to come out as much as on a show like a Big Brother, where you are just sort of watching them live. We weren't just watching them live, we're watching participate in a game. Then that's why we sprinkled some of those relationships through it, but it didn't feel like it was central to what we were trying to do. Central to what we're trying to do is to tell the story of who won this game. And also I would never lie about the fact that I think we probably did miss some stories, but there were so many people in there that we just had to make the choice of, actually, because of where we need to be at the end, these are the stories that we're going to have to focus on.
Thank you. Triggs, you've got you've made a couple of comments. You got a question? Triggs, you there?
Oh yeah, sorry. So obviously, sorry if it's a spoiler alert if anyone's not seen it, but my one, which I'm dead happy about, but I felt like she was kind of featured the whole way through. Like I've actually watched the series twice because I'm sad like that. But it felt like, so was that just lucky that you'd kind of followed her story and then she ended up winning, or like had you made a conscious effort to follow as many stories as you could?
He just told you.
So yeah, we made an effort to try and feature at least something with everybody every day, but some people got bigger scenes than everybody. So everybody was filmed in at least a little moment right from the moment they entered the dorm, but not everyone had big stories. So we were just quite fortunate that, like, Mai didn't feature in a proper story until probably about episode 4, but you saw her sort of sprinkled about, like just in the back of shot here or there. But obviously we knew we'd get to. So the great work of the edit is to try and just sort of have little flashes, little cutaways of her every now and again. So you sort of see that this is a face. And you've watched it twice, Trigg, so you would have noticed those the second time we watched them. But if you didn't know that, she was just another person in the green tracksuit.
So it was like largely built in. You had to kind of like back build it in the edit because you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, we knew we had to try and feature everybody somehow, but it wasn't a conscious sort of. It would have been impossible to sort of make sure that everybody had the same amount of airtime from episode 1.
Okay. Yeah, I know that you were making a comment as a floor producer. Do you want to kind of just talk to that comment? Because I think that obviously that sense about people, emotions and tensions being really high. You made a comment. Yaz, are you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Nicola.
How you doing?
Didn't get to properly chat, but like, loved your work. It was great.
Yours.
Yeah, I was one of the floor. I was part of the floor team on the series, and can definitely confirm that like tensions were really high. They would only leave the dorm to go like if they needed to see the medic or anything like that. And relationships quite early on, there was like talk of like allegiances, and people were just like formed into groups quite quickly. But they were then a lot of that. Obviously, being on the floor, you were in there with them, like taking them to games and stuff like that. And we had to go in and do little chats just to check in on people, and you'd know who were friends and what drama was going on. And not all of that could be featured, but that definitely happened. And people, like the friendship between Phil and I can't remember her name now, the one who had a hearing impediment. They were really tight, which I didn't get to see, but like obviously it was caught on the gallery team that they captured that and stuff like that. So the relationship's really there. But I think as you whistle it down, it felt like almost 1 or 2 people from all of the bigger groups were actually kind of like towards the end. So they didn't actually see each other. So that's maybe where the relationships felt thinner, because all of their friends had died. So they had to just suddenly become friends with these people who they hadn't ever really spoken to and it's, you know, day 12, they've been there that whole time, and suddenly these are the only people in the dorm that they have, and they have to make friends with them so they don't kill them.
I mean, I think that brings us to a really important and interesting point about kind of duty of care and how you kind of deal with the duty of care with such a large pool of contestants. Yeah, Steve, kind of what was some of the issue, or did you have welfare officers? How did you deal with the duty of care of the contestants?
Yeah, we basically took all of the welfare procedures that we have on a normal size reality show and just multiplied it, basically. So everyone had psych evaluations before they went into the show. We had psychs full-time on the show that were available to people if they needed to speak to them. We had a welfare team who were listening into people's microphones and listening to things that are playing out that was separate from the producing reality team. And then we had people like Yaz, they were the floor team that people could go and talk to if they had any issues. And they were brilliant at just sort of managing the tension, the expectation within the cast to make sure that they were, you know, trying to enjoy the experience, because there was excitement when they first went in there, because they felt like they were in their TVs. You know, the sets were so brilliant and they looked like the ones from the drama that there was excitement, but then there was also the pressure of, oh my God, I'm so close to this money. So we did take welfare very seriously, because you have to, because it was, you know, it's heartbreaking if you were to be eliminated and didn't win that money because you were so close to it. Even if you were number 200 out, you're still quite close to such a huge amount of money. So we had to take welfare very seriously, and we had lots of measures in place. And then we had a sort of a tiered system of looking after people once they left the show as well. So people are still getting welfare checkups from us, from our sort of from our casting teams and stuff. So that we took the welfare very seriously throughout the whole thing.
I think Rupert's got a question about just the talking through the decision with the paintballing and the death and the kind
of sorry, the squibs, we didn't get to that, sorry. So yeah, do you want me to do this, Nick? Yeah, we knew we had to, that was one of the big questions when we both were sort of pitching for the show. How are we going to do death, basically, because it was such a dramatic point of the series. And I think that's the thing that everybody thought when they talked about, like, this is going to become a reality show. It won't work because they're not actually dying. That was the thing, right? So we knew that we needed to make something visual for the audience, but also something that the players would see and feel as well, so it would feel as real as possible to, you know, the experience of the contestants in the drama. And we looked at, you know, squibbing, because that's kind of what they use in films and stuff like that. And that was it was a long, old, difficult process to go through that, because nobody has done squibbing on that scale ever. Every SFX company that we've spoken to, there were loads of them that said, nah, we don't want anything to do with this. Because when you do a squib on a film or a drama, you know exactly what you're shooting. You've got in a very controlled environment. You go, right, 3, 2, 1, go, bang, and then you can shoot it, start again. But we didn't have any of that. We needed it to be a surprise to the people that were doing it. So we had to go through a real long, quite intense period of sort of development and to work out how we were going to do this. A remote controlled squib system where the person that was being squibbed didn't know that they were going to be squibbed. So we had to do a lot of development with one of the SFX companies which took on the job, and they were brilliant. We ended up doing like 17 different versions of the nozzle which the squid works through, because we had to get the right type of spray on their t-shirt and stuff like that. And we had to, even the development of like the t-shirt and how the t-shirt would work and what type of t-shirt we used in order to get the effect of the sort of blood splatter. And we went with black because it sort of linked to squid ink and it didn't feel too gory like Redwood. But it took a lot of our time to do squib. Yeah. And in terms of like people, their inverted commas deaths, we just said to people, once you are eliminated and you feel your squib off, you just need to go to the floor. And they just did all the dramatics falls themselves. That wasn't an instruction that we gave them. They just did it. And I just think people just thought, well, this is my moment. I'm out the game, but this is potentially my moment to be on TV. So they just sort of enjoyed it. And some of them were more dramatic than others. And I think it added a nice bit of humor to the show, which I think a good reality show should always include.
It did. I think the fact that the reaction was instantaneous, that was really, really important, because for them, of course, in the drama, it's the moment someone dies. In this, it's sort of like the moment that their dream dies. You know, they were really close to that money, and some of the reactions that you see on their faces, yes, there are people who sort of go, oh, and fall over, but for the most part, it's people going, shit, oh, like that's my chance of winning the money gone. And especially that the girl in Red Light, Green Light, who stops in the really unusual position, and she's sort of like trying to hold it, and she's shaking. She's in like a squat, which I can't hold for like 10 seconds, never mind like how long she was holding it for. And you could see on her face she was thinking, oh no, I've really messed this up, and she sort of goes to the floor, and you know, and it's all over for her. But yeah, I think the important thing is that having an instantaneous moment where people knew, oh, my time in the game is over. And it was I think quite a successful way to achieve it, given how many millions of conversations we had about, will it work? Will it look silly? Will it look, you know, will it be believable? Will they react? Will they not react? So yeah, it was good in the end, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I'll come back to you in a second, Rupert. Quabs, you got a question?
Hello. Hi. I was just really curious because I know obviously that it's co-pro, and I was just really interested in how you balanced those documentary elements with the game show elements, because it seemed like you bounced between them really, really well. And I guess I just want to know what the thinking was when you were mapping that out.
Well, I mean, how much of it is like, I'm not sure that we necessarily like had a master plan at the beginning in terms of, right, we're going to design this like this, and this is how it's going to play out through the edit. I think what those documentaries sort of like, or more like actuality, reality sections give is a couple of things. One, it's a breather from the intensity of the games. It's a chance to get to know contributors in a way that you don't have space for in the games themselves. A little bit of their motivations, maybe a little bit of their backstory, a little bit of the sort of plotting and planning that they might be going for in their heads. But I think, you know, I think we knew we wanted it to have maybe a little bit more breathing space. But I think that works especially well because you've got those very intense high points of the drama. It's something like, you know, the Glass Bridge, or even Dalgona, which was a really early game, but the tension in that sort of final round where, you know, Spencer has effectively led a whole column of people to their like close to death by ending up with the umbrella. So I think there was a really it actually, I feel that in the end it felt quite natural. And I think it's a reaction to those very stressful sort of high points. As a viewer, you want some breathing space. As program makers, we know that we've got to introduce more characters because they're going to be coming down the line, and that gave us space to sort of do that. So I think that was the function. But I think, I don't know what you thought, Stephen, but I think certainly from our point of view, from the Guards' point of view, we wanted there to be enough space to get to know people in a different way and actually to spend time with people and understand them in the way that they were experiencing this really very unusual, intense world, and also give space to the motivations. And I think there was space for that in other places. You know, the processing room interviews where they come in and they sit down behind the table and they're sort of giving their reasons for taking part. That was a really conscious decision we made. Instead of going out to backstories for people, we felt like, hang on, here's a place where you can get to know them. They're looking straight down the well, not quite straight down the camera, they're looking in towards the camera, but they're in their own clothes, and you get to see who they are before they enter the game without having quite a traditional like backstory package or a profile that you might have in something else. So I think that perhaps made it feel a bit more organic, even though that world was constructed, what they were saying was quite was quite unproduced. On the face of it, obviously it was very produced as we were doing it, and we knew what we wanted to get, but don't know what you
Yeah, I
know.
would agree. I think just to add, I think we told, I think when you've got games, you can try, like, it's easy to try and just tell the story of the game. Like, they were like little sports games, right? When you watch a sport, you just tell the story of the game. Whereas I think what we did, and you know, it took us a couple of cuts to get to this, we actually didn't tell the story of the game, we told the story of the people.
Yeah.
And that's what made you interested in the games, rather than just sort of what happened in battleships. It's what happened to player 432 in battleships, which made you interested. What happened to Spencer in Dalgona, which made it interesting. Because the games, of course, are brilliant, but they're so big and there's so many people that you can't invest in it all, and it becomes not interesting. It just becomes a lot of people doing a thing, especially some of those bigger early games. But if you tell the story of the people through it, that's what gives you a show basically that people can invest in and really go, okay, I'm going to back that person because I want to see what happens to that person. You know? And I think the best examples of shows, reality shows and scripted shows, are just, if you invest in the people from early on, then you're going to be invested in what they're doing.
Triggs, you had a question about Red Suits producers on the floor. Do you want to jump in and answer that?
Oh yeah, I just sorry if this was answered in the making of episode. I haven't watched that. But is it Dalgona? Like the shots were really, really close up, and it felt like I just didn't want to know the wardens, were they actually producers with cameras walking around?
So most of the guards were extras that we put in basically, and we had a couple of them have sort of little GoPro things, and we had some adjudication purposes. We had some producers walking around with cameras, but most of the guards that you saw that were extras, and we just had lots of cameras up high basically that were shooting down to get lots of really close-up shots as well. So it was a bit of a mix of both.
Okay, because I was just wondering, like, that would be a really clever, if all of the guards were producers, then it's a great way of getting the footage in.
They weren't, because we wanted them to feel sort of inverted commas scary. I'm sure
Right.
Yaz would admit. So we cast them to sort of give a presence and give a feel that they were, you know, watching over them, making sure that they were adhering to the rules of the game, just as they did in the drama, basically. So yeah, we cast very particular built type people in order to play that role.
Yeah, there were a load of very gigantic men in those suits, I think. And actually there was a lot of choreography went into that. So when you see them come out on the stage, you know, there was a choreographer that came and worked with the guys so that they all moved in a certain way.
Right.
You know, that was thought about quite a lot. You know, we had a sort of an SP who was basically king of the guards, and he was in charge of guards and rehearsing them and making sure they moved in unison. And you know, it was, you know, they took it really, really seriously, and I think you sort of see that. But yeah, that, I think you're right, then you can spot it sometimes in a game where, you know, for adjudication or for another reason, we've got maybe one of the games team might be in a, you know, in a guard suit. You can say, hang on, that person is about a foot shorter than these other guards. But yeah, largely the guards were in there for sort of to be the guards from the drama.
It was just because some of the shots were like so up close that I thought that must be the GoPros.
Yeah, there's a bit of GoPros, but I think as well, the way, are you talking about Dalgona specifically?
Yeah.
I think we did put some cameras in for close-ups, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We
So,
did. Yeah.
And the gallery, the shots of like the guards in the gallery, I assumed that was your real gallery, and but was it not?
No, it was a set that we built specifically for that. Yeah. To try and replicate the drama. Yeah.
Although I love the idea that for the next series we could just have everybody in the gallery in suits. That'd be great.
I just assumed that's what you'd done. I was like, that's really clever.
Yeah. Our gallery was bigger.
Yeah, our gallery was bigger, a lot bigger, yeah.
Dana, and then Zena will go to repeat. So Dana, you had a question.
Hi. Oh, sorry, was it Dina? Yeah.
Dina, sorry.
All right, I didn't know if there was a Dana on the call. I wondered, because I know season 2 is coming out of the TV show, and you mentioned season 2 as well, like series for the TV show for you. Are you planning to sort of mimic the games again from what the TV show does? And if so, because I know a couple of people that worked on the games team, and I know it took a lot of work to get them to a place where you were happy with it. Do you, like, if you are basing it on that, do you get a heads up on what they're going to be this time from Netflix, or how is that working?
I mean, I think we could tell you, but we probably have to kill you or just send a guard round. So, we're not quite in pre-production yet, and obviously, we know there's another series of the drama coming out, so those conversations are yet to be had. But it is actually really interesting, just going back on your point about knowing people in the games teams and sort of getting those games to work. Like, I think it's the amount of work that went into them. I think you watch the drama, and a lot of the drama, there's like the ability to use green screen, do retakes, like stop things, like, it doesn't matter if all of their Dalgona biscuits in the drama aren't exactly the same, because it's all scripted and there's no money at stake and there are no real people involved. So, some of the things that we had to do to get the games to work for a cast of real people who were really gonna play them, and they had to be played completely fairly, was incredible. Like, the thing that you think was really easy, Dalgona, just those honeycomb biscuits, was one of the most difficult elements of any game to get right, because they were left out in the air, they'd go a bit sort of floppy, they all had to be exactly the same. Some of them were too sticky, some of them were too brittle, like it wasn't possible to make some of them work. And we had something like 19 different recipes for honeycomb biscuits before we could get it to actually work and to be fair, and for them to be able to, last from being like actually made and pressed to getting to set, to being, stored in a cupboard overnight and then used the next day. It was ridiculous the amount of time we spent on those biscuits. You just would have it. So yeah, we had an amazing games team who worked all that stuff out for us. But a huge amount of work goes into making something that is in a drama and inherently unreal, and making that in an unscripted sort of process is really challenging, really challenging.
One of my friends that was on the cast can't look at honeycomb anymore. She's like, I'm sick of it, I licked it too much.
She can never have a crunchy again.
No, she's had enough.
I can imagine that. Zena, you've got a question.
Thanks for doing this masterclass, guys. It's great. I love the series. I was just wondering, towards the end, some of the gameplay, some of the players like inserted a sort of fairness strategy. Was that something that you predicted would happen, or did that sort of just come out? And I was just wondering, were there rules to the games that, they were allowed to do that, or, did you want that to happen?
We sort of thought it might happen. We thought it might happen. We weren't sure. It's human behavior, right? You can never really predict what's going to happen. We thought there might be an opportunity. There might be a chance where they start to game the game, and start to feel that if we do it fairly, it'd be better for us. We didn't set up any rules to say that they couldn't do that, but we kind of always knew, because one person wins, that as much as they're trying to do it, someone will always dissent. And I think there was 2 really good examples within the show where that happened. Obviously, Ashley on the bridge, and Mai when they played the dice game. So I think, yeah, there is that natural, especially when you're so big and you become so small, we can all sort of kumbaya this, is what they tried to do. But then somebody will always go against it, because not everybody has the same motives, and which is good for telly, because it gives you more drama.
Did you know those people would do that, or were you sort of like watching, hoping somebody would? Yeah.
We were just watching it, following it, and someone does this and you go, oh my God, she's not gone with it, or why isn't she jumping? You're like, the glass bridge was such a hard one, because there's so much to consider. You have to watch the front, you've got to watch the back, you've got to watch everything that's going on. You're obviously really, it's like safety-wise, and we're just making sure everyone was doing things right, so we could, everyone get across the bridge safely. And then yeah, then you sort of realize, go like, oh, why has he jumped again? And he jumped again, and they're like, oh my God, he's not playing. So you know that's going to play out brilliantly in the edit. So yeah, you don't know who's going to do it. No one gives us a head up, or no one gives like people like Yaz, who are floor producers, the heads up of that this is going to happen, or we don't send in a floor producer and go, right, get that person to stir it up, because that will make it. It was just, they were left totally to work to their own devices and play the game how they wanted to.
I mean, it's been phenomenal. I know we've got like a couple of minutes left. Just quickly before we kind of sign off, I just wanted to kind of make comment about, obviously over the last couple of weeks, there's been so much conversation about what's been going on in the industry and the kind of shifting changes of the industry. And I'm understanding that constructed reality and kind of these kind of bigger game shows, or these bigger shows, seems to be kind of booming. First, Nicola, can I ask you, what's your kind of thoughts? Is this a kind of good space to be looking at kind of reality shows? What's your kind of overall thoughts of what's happening in the industry, and whether this is a kind of booming space that maybe people should be kind of considering?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, it's a really tough time. No one is sort of immune from it. You know, companies and individuals have, you know, good spells and bad spells. So sort of acknowledge it's really tough out there. I think what's interesting about these types of shows, you look at the start of the year, sort of Gladiators coming back, Traders doing amazing numbers again, Squid Game before Christmas obviously doing great numbers and coming back again. I think there is, in a really crowded marketplace, people are looking for these big entertainment shows, and when they land and they work well, you know, people want more and more of them. And actually, I think sometimes for broadcasters, you know, they're looking across to other people and going, well, they've got their hit version of X, we're going to try and find our hit version of the same thing. So it's definitely a good time for these types of shows. But a lot of what I hear from commissioners is sort of fewer, bigger, better. And that message is sort of coming from like commissioners and departments who, you know, previously might have been saying something different, I think. So, I mean, that's good news for companies like Studio Lambert, who, you know, this is your bread and butter, isn't it? And it's good for us because it's an area that the garden is sort of pushing further into. So, I mean, I suppose the other good thing about it is those, although they're coming, you know, it's fewer, bigger, better, the teams on them are quite large teams, aren't they? You're making things at scale. So you think, oh, there's potentially more jobs attached to one of those than there would be to like a retrospective box set. But I mean, it's tough out there. So how long it lasts, who knows? You know, will this genre sort of reach saturation point? I don't know. I think it's just on all of us to try and keep on making shows which people will come to, get more commissions, create more work for people, and hopefully that continues.
Steve, have you got any kind of thoughts about the kind of, I mean, I'm sure as an EP, you're getting loads of people kind of reaching out and just telling you about your situation, your kind of thoughts about what's happening currently, and even any kind of thoughts or advice in terms of how people can kind of be resistant or get through this moment.
No, yeah, it's just to echo what Nick says, really. It is a tough time, and not one that we've sort of seen for a long old time in industry. I was mentioning to Nick before, and like, I think we were sort of a bit fortunate as an industry during COVID that we didn't totally close down like a lot of other industries did. And I think sort of that is maybe sort of catching up with television now, as like the hit that all the other industries took. And so they're not just pouring money into marketing and advertising and stuff like that, which obviously really affects what happens to us. I do hope that shows like, you know, Traitors and Squid Game show that there is an appetite, and like Gladiators especially, I think that's been a phenomenal success. They show that there's an appetite for TV. Everyone keeps saying TV is dying, but I don't think TV is dying. The way we watch TV may have changing, but if there is good shows, people will watch them in their numbers. And I think we've just got to, I'd hope commissioners and networks just sort of stay brave to that fundamental belief that if you have good content, people will come to it and people will find out about it. And it's easier for people to find out about it now because of social media and stuff like that. So I think we just need everyone to sort of hold their nerve a little bit try and still be creative. Obviously, we've got to be imaginative with budgets and stuff like that, because, you know, we had a big budget on Squid. We won't lie and say it wasn't, but we still had to cut our cloth accordingly. Do you know what I mean? We could have spent much more money. And then Nick will tell you, had loads of conversations about how we're going to cut the budget from this and how we're going to cut the budget from that. So everyone is, even a giant like Netflix, is still sort of counting the pennies, so to speak. So it is tough, but if you can, try and still be resilient, still get in touch with people, because you never know when things might change, and companies like The Guardian are always pitching, so things will always start to come up. So it's just good to keep in people's mind. And, you know, if you're not working, just try and meet up with people, just so they know that you're on their radar. And so if something does come up, then they can start to consider you when things get a bit better, I think, hopefully.
And I think don't feel as well like that you're hassling people at all. I think it's weirdly, it's almost like you've just got to wait for the timing to be right. And you might not know that a company's just had a commission. So don't worry about, reaching out and feeling like, oh God, I'm really hassling people, because your CV just needs to land at the moment when, a commission's come in, or, something's being greenlit. So yeah, it's tough out there, but hopefully, things will start to pick up and things will improve.
Do we have any do we think we're going into the new financial year in April? Do you kind of predict that we'll see any kind of changes at that point from where you're sitting?
I mean, you'd hope so. I think like this time of year coming into the spring is like historically has been a time when projects get greenlit. So I know, that I don't think that that's necessarily changed. Hopefully that will still happen as we go into spring. People will be getting their green lights, and it's interesting sort of thinking about Channel 4 and the terrible situation that they're sort of facing with all those job cuts. They are still commissioning some stuff out of there, so hopefully that'll continue, and and there'll be shows coming from both them, from the BBC, from the streamers, and anywhere else we can get them away, basically.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Steve, go, please.
No, so it's always like the job of a commissioner is like, you're always taking a gamble, right? I think that you're gambling on someone else's money. I'm sure Nick's been a commissioner before, so she will know what that's about, right? But I think when you know that there's an appetite for things and big scale things, and I think you're taking more of an educated gamble, because you know people want to watch a certain type of show and they've got an appetite for it. So seeing successes, and it's good that we've had successes over the last 6 months, hopes people will take more of a risk and gamble a little bit more and help everybody out.
No, definitely. And Rupert, I know you've got kind of quite a few questions. I'm sure we can connect you afterwards and you can kind of continue the conversation. So we didn't get all your questions asked. Thank you so much, guys. That was really informative, and you kind of you watch something, and when you watch it on screen, you kind of forget about all the effort and the energy that goes behind. And that's always a kind of mark of a really brilliant show, when you're not thinking about people running around, what they're doing behind. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and kind of the information about how you pulled that together. Obviously, if people got more questions, let us know, and we can kind of push, send them and push you in the right directions. I hope you guys continue to have a really great week, or the rest of the week. I know it's Thursday, Friday's coming up soon. Once again, thank you all for your time. I will see you in a couple of weeks' time. We've got Remy's session.
Sim, just before we go, can I just say, I'm sure Nick will echo this. This show would not be able to happen without an amazing production team. The team that about all the logistics of this show is absolutely incredible. Like, just getting 456 people to an airfield in Bedford from across the world is an amazing thing. Making sure they've all got food to eat, making sure they've all got underwear, toothpaste, all that sort of stuff. The logistics that went into the show were incredible. So a big shout out to the team that did that.
Completely.
Big up. And Yaz, as you're here, we give you an extra special big up as well, because you were part of that team. So big up as well. Thank you, guys. I will see you all very, very soon. Nicola, thank you so much for joining us. Steve, we love you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye.